Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Heather. I'm a corporate partnership specialist, CEO, and founder of Bridge Raise. We help charities and nonprofits raise more money from companies. And I am thrilled today to be having this conversation about using case studies for
Mm.
corporate partnerships with Joe Waters. Before I launch into the conversation, though, please do join us in the chat and let us know what you really want to know about case studies during this conversation. I will do my very best to weave it in. I think we've got a good plan for you, but if I'm missing something, I absolutely want to add it in. So put that in there. Also, if you have any questions, please add those in as well, and we will answer them. If we don't get to all of them during our conversation, I will loop back and answer them in LinkedIn afterwards.
Nice.
Welcome, Joe, and thanks
Hey,
so much for
Heather.
being here. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself if they don't know you already?
Oh boy. Well, as you know, Heather, I've been in the nonprofit field for 30 years now. If spending the first 20 working in the nonprofit world at people like, the Arthritis Foundation, PBS, and of course, my last position was at Boston Medical Center, where I started their cost marketing program. But since 2004, about the same time I started at Boston Medical Center, I started writing Selfish Giving, right? Because people were like, I am so sick of getting your emails, you saying, hey, did you read this? Did you read that? And stuff like that. They were like, why don't you put this all in one place every week so that we can read that? And that's how Selfish Giving was born. And I've been writing, as you know, a newsletter for almost as long, but I can't believe it's been over 20 years now that I've been doing this stuff, right? And I focus, like you, I focus on building win-win partnerships between nonprofits and businesses that raise money and change the world.
Well, and thank you so much for your newsletter. For any of you who are not already signed up, honestly, it's such a must-read part of my week. I
Thank you, Heather.
always read it. There's such good information there, links to other resources. Joe really curates both stuff from his own, network and knowledge, but also from others. And so I really encourage everybody to get on Joe's email list for sure. Joe is someone I turn to when I want to learn more, and that's why I wanted to have this session. I really believe in case studies, but I know I can always learn more about how to do them better, as can my clients. So I'm so excited for us to launch into this conversation. So let's start with the basic thing. Why do we need case studies as a part of our corporate partnership? Prospecting, pitching, all the things.
Yeah. Well, think about it, Heather. You're going in to meet a prospect that you're hoping to become a new partner, right? And one of the opportunities you have, though, is you have the opportunity to bring a partner in that has been successful in doing a program with you in the past. So maybe you've worked with a retailer or a restaurant or a manufacturer or what have you. Imagine if you could bring him or her, that C-level person, into that meeting with you. So you could talk about the partnership, but they could talk about how great the partnership was, right? Think about how valuable that is. Unfortunately, C-level executives don't have the time, right, to go to all our meetings with us, unfortunately. Can you imagine, Heather? I can't think of anything more fun, but they can't. So one of the best ways to bring those people with you is through a case study, right? Where they can say, yes, we had a partnership with XYZ organization, and this is what we got out of the partnership. Right. So that's what's so important about using case studies. It allows someone else to talk about you as opposed to you always talking about yourself. Like you giving me this wonderful introduction, saying all these wonderful things about me. And I can say to people, don't believe me. Look at what Heather just said about me.
That's right. It's true. And I think one of the really important points that you said in that description is they get to say what was in it for them too.
Yes.
So it's not just like, this is what happened.
Yes.
But like what they got out of it
Yeah.
comes through in the case study. And I think that, shifts it a little bit from just being like facts.
Yes.
It's not just the facts. It's more than the facts, right?
Yep. That's right.
So when we're thinking about it in our own organizations, we're thinking, okay, pressure's on. Joe said case studies will help me build more corporate partnerships. But I don't even know where to start. Yep. Where do I start? How do I figure out what's the right case study?
Yeah. Well, the most important thing to think about is first of all, you don't have to write case studies about every partnership you do, but you
Right.
should write case studies about the partnerships that you want more of, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we all have kind of that unique partnership where we say to ourselves, this was good, but I don't know how I would replicate this with another partner, right?
Mhm.
So what you want to do is you want to start with those companies that you've worked with. You're like, you know what? I had a great point of sales program with this specific company. I want more point of sale programs. That's the one that you should be writing up, right? So that's the one you want to focus on.
Sure. I totally agree. And I think too, one of the things I think ones you want more of, and sometimes ones that are a little bit unique to
Yes.
you, I
Yeah.
think. Like, if it makes you differentiates you in the pitch conversation, wouldn't that be a nice feature
Yeah,
as
and
well,
well,
right?
sometimes too, like you can, what's interesting too, Heather, is I've written case studies, multiple case studies about the same company because I believe a case study at its best should be about one thing. So sometimes you can write a case study from a particular angle. I did one of these, a bunch of case studies for Black Dog Institute in Australia, and one of the things that we focused on, it was the case study was just how successful it was for employees and customers. But then I also wrote in the case study about how it was a great example of how a CEO got involved in the partnership. So what's good about that is regardless of what type of company you take that to, if the CEO wants to be more of an activist, that was a great example of that. So that you could point to and say, hey, look at this company over here. This CEO was really involved with the campaign, and
Right.
you could be that CEO too, even though you run a different sort of company. So
Right.
sometimes what's good is, even though I tell people they don't have to write case studies on every partnership, you should have a few case studies, right? It's nice that when you can share more than one. Now, if you only have one partnership, you got to start somewhere, right? But in
Right.
a lot of instances, you can write those case studies from different perspectives.
Well, and I love that because I think one of the things that really intimidates people is like asking a company to give them the information for a
Yes.
case study. And like that seems like the heavy lifting, right?
Yeah.
Asking and then gathering all that
Yeah, that's right.
information. And so if you can then gather that and then like, put different angles on it,
Yes. Yep.
that feels like,
Yeah.
okay, all of a sudden this just got a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, and think about this too, Heather. When you go to the company and you pitch the case study idea to them, because the case study will hopefully be written about how they benefited from the partnership.
Mm,
Think about the internal social proof that is that now you have someone in the company who can take that to his or her boss and say, "Hey, look at this great partnership that we did."
yeah,
With
yeah.
this particular organization and how we benefited for. So in a lot of ways, I actually wrote a post about this not too long ago, Heather, where I said the first job of a case study is retention, right? So by getting the partner talking about the case study and how it was successful for them, that is an excellent first step. And think about it. If you wrote a case study just to keep the partner intact, keep the partnership intact, that would be a worthwhile case study. But you're going to be able to use it for other things too.
Well, totally, that would be worthwhile. I mean, we are often looking for strategies around how to strengthen our partnership.
Yes.
And I could not agree more with that idea of retention because I do often find, even internally, right? They're in a rush as well, and
Yeah.
sometimes don't take the time to celebrate. They don't take the
Yes.
time to really think about
Yep.
all the different benefits.
Yep.
If maybe they grew the relationship with the CEO
Yep.
got more, the customer got,
Yep.
employees got something out of it. All these different groups got something out of it, and if there isn't that moment of pause
Hmm.
where they think about that,
Yes.
and
Yep.
we could go on and on about fulfillment reports on another day. I'm sure
Yeah.
how
Sure.
those don't always capture
Yeah.
that either. This is a great opportunity for that. And you know what you said just made me also think like, how could that case study even be structured in a way that they want to share it with all their employees internally, right?
Yes.
Like, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of times too, what I emphasize about case studies is number one, it's a great internal asset for the nonprofit too,
Mhm.
because it's a training tool, right?
Right.
So as you bring people into your organization to do partnerships with you, you could say, this is a case study that shows how we do partnerships, right?
Ah,
Then you have the case study that you're able to take out and share it with prospects and turn into partners. But then your existing partner can also use it as a form of internal social proof to show their boss how great of a partnership this was. So it's useful on multiple levels.
totally is. You use the term social proof. I
Yes.
love this term, but I want to just pause for 1 sec. There may be some people watching right now who are
Yeah.
not familiar with that term. So maybe we
Yep.
could just take a second to, build out what is social proof, for everybody listening.
Social proof is when you look to other people to help you make your decisions. Okay. And I'll give you a tangible example of this. Amazon reviews, right? We go to
Mhm.
Amazon, we see something we like, and what's the first thing we do? We go down and look at the reviews. And we don't look at the 5-star reviews because those could be public relations agencies just publishing 5-star reviews. We don't look
Right.
at the 1-star reviews because those are the cranks. But
Yeah.
we look at the 3-star reviews, right?
Right.
That's what I do anyways, right?
Yeah.
And so the whole idea is you're really hopefully getting an honest assessment. Is this something that has, is a great product or a great service? And you're really looking to others to confirm. I have another name for these types of people too, Heather. I call them deferrers. And what that means is they defer to others to help them make the decisions because
Right.
they're not sure if this is a great partnership. But if you can come in and you can say, look at this person, how successful they were, and look how this person and how successful they are, and look at what this company did, that makes the company feel much better that they're making the right decision. And let's admit it too, Heather, one of the most important ways to get a company for a partnership is to them know that you've done this before successfully. I mean, you and I both know if you've never done corporate partnerships before, you got to find someone who really loves you to kick off that partnership, right? Because not everyone's going to want to go. I mean, that's why they end up with people like St. Jude or the American Lung Association or Product
Mm.
Red or what have you. They have experience in something like this.
That's right.
So case studies are a way of confirming hopefully what people already believe, that this would be a good partnership and you can get the job done.
Yeah, it's so true. We talk a lot, especially with organizations that I work with that are on the early side of the journey
Yes.
around this momentum, right? You have
Yep.
to get the first few because
Yes.
one of the reasons that companies go to the organizations that always get all the other
Yep.
ones is because it's a safer decision, right?
That's right.
But also those people have social proof. They have
Yep.
experience. And
Yep.
with corporate partnerships, that's, it's a significant part of the puzzle,
That's right.
doing it well.
Yep.
And we do at Bridgewise help charities learn how to do partnership well and be good partners
That's right.
because that's part of it. And I think case studies are a great way of like showing that
Yes.
you're a good partner, right? Like
Absolutely. That's right.
demonstrating it. So that's
Yeah,
a
that's right.
that's
And,
one of the tools.
committing that really to paper to really think about that because I can't tell you the number of companies that I've talked to too, where they've been like, yeah, we did this because we really love their work. And I was like, I'm sure you do. But what are some of the other reasons? And that's when they go digging a little bit. And then they
That's
find out, like, for example, all this, if they probably haven't done a survey, but all this anecdotal evidence that employees really loved it. Let's put some of that in the case study to let
sure.
people know. And, by the way, and then what I usually tell people, Heather, is I say, hey, next year, do a survey of your employees so that you can collect the
For real.
data on that as
For
opposed to
real.
just anecdotes.
For real. Yeah. The more surveys, the better, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I
We
mean, we
want
could we
data.
could have a whole session just on survey, how
That's it.
how nonprofits should be doing a better job surveying their audiences.
That's it.
That's a whole area of opportunity.
Sure. And very specifically your corporate partners. I mean,
Yes.
the whenever people are saying like, what's the next level? What are my really best in class clients doing?
Yeah.
They're surveying their corporate partners that they have right now to keep them. So that's a tangent. We won't go on it, but
Yeah.
just a little tidbit for people to make note.
So many more future shows, Heather.
That's right.
Mhm.
Okay, so drilling down, we're talking about case studies. I bet some people are kind of wondering to themselves, like, what does Joe mean when he's saying case study? Because I mean, I have a business background. I've, had those like, big, huge
Yeah.
book-like things handed to me where it's
Yeah.
like, here's the case study of,
Yeah.
how Target, had to leave Canada, like
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing, these
Right.
big
Right.
things, and that feels, again, overwhelming. We're trying to simplify things for these fundraisers who have got like oodles of things on their to-do list. So
Yeah.
really, when we're talking about case studies, what what are we talking about? What's the structure? What does this look
Yeah.
like in practical terms?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, in many instances, a case study has a three-tier format where you start with what the problem is, right? And
Mhm.
I think what's really important about that is don't start with the problem for the nonprofit. Start with the problem for the company. What
Mhm.
was the company trying to achieve? What was the challenge that they were having?
Mhm.
That maybe they didn't work with a cause or nonprofit, so they wanted to get in that space, or they had had very successful partnerships with other nonprofits, but they wanted to expand their reach. What was the thing they were trying to address by working with a nonprofit? And
Right.
then in the second part, we talk about the solution to that, how the nonprofit solved that problem. And I'm being very tangible here, Heather. Like, I think if you outline a challenge, you should show, as to the best of your ability, how a nonprofit would address that particular challenge. And then I would talk about, in the third part of the case study, why that nonprofit was the best. So, in addition to saying they solved this problem, how did they do it better than everyone else? Right. So, a lot of times, too, when I'm talking to companies that work with multiple partners, one of the things I'll ask them is, where does this nonprofit organization rank in terms of the nonprofits that you
Mhm.
work with? What makes them different? What makes them special? And that is a great way or a place to really distinguish the nonprofit, so people can say, wow, not only is this a good nonprofit, but this is the best nonprofit. Because you don't want people to conclude from this case study that they could work with any nonprofit and get the same results.
100%. You
Yeah.
sure don't.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
so focusing in on that for a sec, um, you mentioned one question that you would ask the company, what makes them special or
Yeah.
different. Are there a couple of other really
Yeah.
tangible like questions that you could offer up that would help people frame out the information they want from the company?
Yeah. Right. Right. And, the most important thing is in the results section. That's what I
Okay.
found. A lot of times too, when we're talking about the problem or the challenge, Heather, what I'll ask them is to tell me the backstory of the partnership. How did you get involved with this organization? How did this come about that you talked to someone at this organization? And it's usually within that you're able to kind of pull out what the challenge is. And of course, they're giving you a great narrative, right?
Right.
Because what you want to do in the case study is write this out in kind of instead of a bullet way, write it out in a storytelling sort of way, where you're telling the story about how these two organizations got involved. And then one of the things that you want to do, which is, it can be one of the most challenging parts of a case study, is outlining exactly how you work together. Okay. Now, what's important here, Heather, is this doesn't mean you throw everything into the kitchen sink, right? You know what I mean? In the sense,
Mhm.
like, you have to say, well, you did one, two, three things with the nonprofit. Those are really the most important programs. If you did this little program over here, maybe you donated some blankets or blah, 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 that's great and everything. But I don't think we need to keep that in the case study, because let's remember too, Heather, people aren't looking for 2,000 word case studies. Okay.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
what, my case studies are usually around 750 to 1,000 words long. And you are really focused on, like, what is that thing that you want more of, right?
Mhm.
So in the strategic assets, you'll talk about that. And then, of course, the results section, when you ask them for really tangible votes about, like, how did this benefit the company? How did it benefit your customers? How did it benefit your employees? How did it benefit your connection with your communities that you're in? Right. And
Mhm.
then one of the things that I always suggest to people, Heather, is I always sit down with my corporate case study clients and say, if you had lunch with a counterpart at another company and they said to you, gee, you guys have done a great job with your partnership with XYZ nonprofit. How do we do something like that? And then what they reveal are usually not only some good insights about working with a nonprofit partner, but it allows the nonprofit to kind of back into those recommendations and say, hey, do you see the things they're saying that makes a good nonprofit partner is who we are? Right. So it's a
Right.
little bit of a straw person, right, that they can set up. And so I always ask that, and it's interesting because they always have to think for a minute, but then they're like, you know what? I think you really need to align this with your values as an organization, or you got to get your employees involved, or, work with more than one organization. And think about that. If you're going out to an organization that's already working with maybe several charities, is there an argument that someone can help you make that you should be an additional charity?
Right? That
Yeah.
would be such a great argument because I hear all the time from people, "Oh, I'm not gonna go to them because, they're already with so and so," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, that could mean that that's their cause
That's
of choice." They probably want multiple people in that space,
That's the best thing.
right?
And I always tell you know what I tell people, Heather? I have a good friend who sells advertising. He says, "Joe, it's almost impossible to sell advertising to someone who's never bought advertising before. People
Right,
who buy advertising buy other forms of advertising, right? And it's
right.
the same with partnerships. One of your best prospects for a partnership is someone who already has one because they get it,
I
right? You
get
don't
it.
have to explain it to them.
I love it. Yeah, I think that so I have to tell you that bit surprised by the length. So that's a very robust, amount of words to me.
Yeah.
How do you translate that into like more of a sound bite kind
Yeah.
of piece?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, for me, I'm often trying to get people to put things on one slide in a deck.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a lot of information. How do you distill that down?
Well, it's a good point too, because one of the things that I talk to clients about too is like a case study can be used at every stage of the funnel, Heather, right? It can be used at the awareness stage when people are getting to know you. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about too,
Yeah.
in terms of like taking little snippets of your case study and putting it in your emails to people, or putting it in your email signature, or putting it in on that first slide when you talk to someone about your organization. But
Mhm.
the good news with case studies is that they can be used throughout the process. And one of the things, Heather, that people are often surprised is I tell people not to put case studies on their websites. Okay.
Okay.
Because I think case studies come during the consideration, are best used, full case studies are best used during the consideration, which is the middle part of the funnel, and then the decision stage, which is the bottom part of the funnel.
Mhm.
Because you just don't want to be emailing those case studies around to people, right?
Right.
You want to be able to be talking to them as you and I are talking right now to contextualize how that case study applies to them, right? So I think it's very important that in your initial connection with people, drip that information, right?
Mhm.
Who's got a great example of this? Breast Cancer Research Foundation, I believe, has a great corporate partnership page. And one of the things I love about it is when you click on a corporate partner, it gives you a testimonial from that corporate partner instead of a full case study, because you
Oh,
shouldn't be handing out case studies on your website. Right.
okay.
And so I always advise people to like think about how and keep your case study close to you. Right.
Right.
And only drip it out in the beginning so that hopefully you can get that meeting, that one on one with the person where you can actually explain to them how that case study needs to be interpreted. Whereas if you give people too much information, as you know that, Heather, they can make the decision without you. You know what I mean? You
Right.
sent me all this stuff. What do I need you for? You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
I look
Or
through
you
this.
said or what I say, "You sent me all this stuff. I'm gonna read none of it because there's
That's
way too
right.
much."
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
hold that,
Yeah.
I often tell people to keep the case studies close to you because you don't want to reveal or give too much information away until that point is right. And what I
Right.
really try to do and what everyone should think about is like, okay, how do we do that at the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and the decision stage?
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. This idea of using it as a credibility booster, you
Yeah,
just need a little bit of information at the
that's
beginning to
right.
do that.
Yeah.
But then, if it's gonna be more of a teaching tool to get
Yeah.
them to think more broadly
Yeah.
about what might be possible, then that's in a different stage. And then, as you said, like in the decision point,
Yes.
another stage. Because I do think for me, sometimes I'll find that I really want the company to think more broadly about what is possible.
Yeah.
And a case study can really, really help do that because it actually has happened successfully,
Yeah.
with somebody else. And so, I think that can be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So we started to talk about where to use them for maximum impact. Anything else you want to share there? I also had a note about where not to use them. not on the website. Is there any
Right.
other way we don't want to use them?
Yeah, and like I said, I'd be thoughtful about how I would use the case study.
Okay.
And also one of the things too, and Heather, you get this too, like, you want to make sure you're sharing the right case study with the right prospect, right?
Right.
And you don't know that until you get some more information from them, right? So it isn't fair to send them over 5 case studies without really knowing what they need. I'd rather have you go with 1 or 2 case studies so that you can be very specific. One of the important thing about case studies too is
Mhm.
before you get yourself all ramped up about case studies, go to the corporate partner and ask them if they would be interested in a case study. Outline some of the benefits that I talked about, not only to you, but only to them. But I can't tell you the number of organizations that I've worked with where they say, yes, we're going to do this case study. We're going to start working, blah, blah, blah. And then they call the partner and they say, especially, this is the case with big companies, especially, they'll say, we don't do case studies. We
Yeah.
don't do case studies for our clients or our vendors or and stuff like that. And they don't fully understand the difference here. But some people are very adamant, like, no, we're
Yeah.
not going to do a case
No.
study. And it's like, then you kind of ramped yourself up for. So I always tell people the first conversation you should have is with your partner to see if they would be interested in learning more about doing a case study.
Yeah, that leads to actually a question that someone submitted that I'd like to touch on. What they're finding when they do case studies, so it is an organization that actually does them, is
Yeah.
the company is willing to give very anecdotal and very soft and mushy
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
comments and
Yeah.
testimonials, but not like the brass tacks
Yeah.
data.
That's right.
And that can be distressing, or that's what the charities think they need in order for this case study to be effective. What do
That's right.
you have to say about that? Do we need the data to make it successful? How do we get around this?
Yeah.
Thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Well, I do 2 things to make sure that I get the data. The first thing that I do is I actually sent a questionnaire to the corporate partner, and it
Uh,
has about 7 or 8 questions. It depends on the company. 7 or 8 questions that they have to answer before I'll actually get on a Zoom call for a short call with them to talk about the questionnaire. And the reason why, Heather, I started sending a questionnaire to people, because you would talk to people on a Zoom call and they would say, I've got some information about that, but I'll have to get back to you about looking it up. When you send a questionnaire, it forces them to look up that information in advance, right? So
right.
then when you have the conversation with them, which actually can be very short, is that you can be much more particular. Another thing that you want to do to make sure you get that information is do some research online. I actually have been playing around with Perplexity has a new deep
Oh,
research function to it. So what it does is it pulls from all the sources. So what you can do is, if this is a company in a nonprofit that has put out a lot of press releases and stuff like that, you can gather all that information. And what's good about that is a lot of times that information is stuff that you can use because it's statistics and stuff like that, and it's useful to you. And it's already been approved, right?
right.
Because if it's already out there in the world, someone has said this is okay to share with people, right?
Ah,
And I always tell that to clients too. I do not want any proprietary information, right? You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because companies worry about that. They're like,
They do.
who are you
Yeah.
going to share this with? And it's like, it's actually a very small group of people, because because we're not putting it on the website, we're not making this public information. We're only sharing this with prospects that we have a deeper relationship with
Yeah.
than just like blowing it out there, emailing it to people
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right.
It makes them feel much more comfortable. But that being said, don't give me proprietary information,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is a lot of information that they can share.
Perfect. I
Yeah.
love that. And I will say, actually, on sort of the flip side, I've actually seen a number of organizations who've put their case study into the public.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll share, if I'm trying to get a client to think about how they could use a case study, or even show them an active case of a
Mhm.
partnership like what I want them
Yeah.
to pitch. There are articles that are in, often marketing magazines
Yep.
and that kind of thing.
Yep.
The consumer packaged good magazine or food magazines, like that really do profile a case study between a charity and a
Yes.
company. So there's some companies that are willing to like put it all out there, and there's
Yep.
others that, as you said, are more conservative.
Yeah, that's right.
This
And
isn't
see,
there.
you know, that's the thing too, is that's why we have to look at the case study as kind of a multi-year process, because we always need to be editing the case study, updating the case study. Like actually one of the services that I now offer, Heather, is after writing a case study, I'll go back a year later and actually rewrite it for you. Because during that year, I'm going to give you a list of things that you're going to work on to make the case study stronger. You can do that too. Right? Anyone can do that. But the whole idea is that it's very organic and it's going to grow and get better over time. And especially as the partner starts feeling more comfortable with the case study as a source of information about the partnership.
Yeah, and more excited, right? They'll start
Yeah,
seeing the
that's right.
benefits internally. So I love
Yep.
that. Well, Joe, we have run out of time. This has been awesome. I know people are going to get so much out of this session. You've been so generous with your
My
knowledge.
pleasure.
But I also want to remind people that they can go find you and
Yes.
have you help them with this if that's something that interests them. So let the people know where to find Joe
Yep.
and how to follow up with you about
Well,
this.
people can visit me at selfishgiving.com and they can sign up for my newsletter. And actually, frequently, I talk about case studies. I talked about case studies in my newsletter that is out today, which you can see archived on my blog, selfishgiving.com/blog. And one of the things that I want to tell people too, I know there are a lot of nonprofits out there that maybe can't afford to hire someone to do it, and they just need help getting started. If people email me at the website, first of all, I'm happy to send you a couple examples of case studies that I've written so that you can check them out. And I'm happy to send you the 9 questions I ask every corporate partner, right? Because that's where over time, writing over 100 case studies, I've really kind of learned about how to write these things and what questions to ask. And it's not brain surgery, Heather, right? You do a few of these, it's easy to figure out what the types of questions, but I can give you a leg up a bit by giving you that information. So if people email me at joe@selfishgiving.com or they visit selfishgiving.com and contact me, I'm happy to share that information, because I always tell people, if you have the time to do case studies, you can do them yourself. The people I work with don't have time.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
that's a perfect place to end. If you don't have time and need this help, reach out to Joe. But if you want to test it yourself, you have somebody in your organization that loves to write
Mhm.
and interview and do those things, then Joe's got resources to help you out. Thanks
Absolutely.
again, Joe. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to DM me in LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer. And thanks again. Good luck with your corporate partnerships.
Thank you, Heather.